those members of Congress to ultimately vote against it. And so I want to talk a little bit about how we did that. First of all, when I say we, I want to clarify that my organization, Community Alliance for Global Justice, which I don't work there anymore, but I'm still a member, we played an important but a small role in an overall much larger sort of galaxy of organizations. Especially, there was an ad hoc coalition that reformed, that really had formed during the WTO, leading up to the WTO protests. And a bunch of those people from labor, environmental, faith, and community organizations came together again in an ad hoc form, which then, happily, later actually became a formal coalition, is now the Washington Fair Trade Coalition. But at the time, in 2004, 2005, and also previously in 1999 during the WTO mobilizations, it was just an ad hoc group that got together to coordinate efforts on these fights. And also, a key role was played by the Washington State Jobs and Justice Coalition, which at the time of the CAFTA vote had also been around for nearly a decade and had been working on trade somewhat intermittently throughout the years, but had taken a special focus on trade agreements that year. So what did we do? We got together in these different coalition formations and did a power analysis. I thought, well, how are we going to turn these people around? Now, against our side is of course a very strong free trade ideology in Washington State, especially because the nature of many of the export-based industries in Microsoft and other computer companies, Boeing and related, aerospace, agriculture, biotechnology. We've all heard it, right? Washington is the most trade-dependent state in the nation, which is true, but that's sort of an easy explanation of trade policy when in fact NAFTA, CAFTA, WTO are riddled with very, very serious problems, which I can't address in the 4 minutes or so that I have left in detail, but I think you know where I'm coming from. And like I said, also to our disadvantage was the fact that all of these Democrats had already started saying they were going to vote for CAFTA when we started. Well, to our advantage, of course, was that there was already a dozen years of history of fair trade organizing, starting with the NAFTA fight, and then, of course, with the huge mobilization against the WTO in 1999. So not only had many networks been built during those fights, but also consciousness was raised throughout the region. Not only, which did two things. First of all, that meant that there were many people who already saw themselves as fair trade activists, who said, I've heard about CAFTA, I want to do something about it, I want to get involved. But perhaps equally importantly is, even those people who didn't consider themselves fair trade activists, there was so much consciousness that was built around NAFTA and especially WTO that other people got it. Whether it was just people who were talking to on the street, whether it was people in the media, whether it was people in Democratic district organizations or grassroots groups we were reaching out to, it wasn't that hard to find allies because people already got the basic issues. So I'll briefly talk about what we did as a coalition, and I'll go on and talk specifically about what CAGJ did as a membership-based organization. In the coalition, we agreed that we needed to get the representatives, the members of Congress, to take a stand against CAFTA before it came to a vote, because we knew that the pressure was going to be immense on the entire Congress, Republican and Democrat, to vote for it. Remember, the vote came in 2005, so the war is going. The Social Security, Bush's attempt to privatize Social Security had been a total flop, and CAFTA was clearly going to be a major policy priority. So we knew this was going to be a big fight. And we couldn't depend on sort of a private handshake and say, oh yeah, sure, don't worry, I'll vote against CAFTA when it comes up for it. We knew we needed to have them to publicly state their opposition. Otherwise, there would be a great danger of them changing their mind at the last minute under immense pressure. So the coalition first targeted Adam Smith in the 9th District, in part because as a leader of the New Democrats, we saw him as playing a very influential role on trade policy in Washington State in general. So coalition members went to Democratic Party district meetings, to labor unions, to community groups, to churches, synagogues, environmental groups, and started just giving presentations and asking people to communicate with Adam Smith, and the letters and the calls started coming in. But months went by, and we continually asked for a response from representatives, and the answer was always, of course, this is a complicated issue, I need to do more research and analysis, and I'm not ready to take a stand. Well, then Jobs of Justice came to him, or contacted him, working with a number of laid-off workers whose jobs had been outsourced, who were from his district, asking him to talk with him about the impacts of free trade agreements on his district and his constituents. When that got no response, then a number of unions and other groups then picketed an Adam Smith fundraiser. Now these weren't just any old group showing up for a picket. These were long-time allies of his, people who had worked closely with Adam Smith's office for years. And so for them to show up and picket outside his fundraiser was a really big deal. I wasn't there. I wish I'd been, because I heard he really came unglued. I mean, nothing against him as a person, but apparently it really worked. And very shortly afterward, the meeting was held with these workers in his district who had been laid off. And not that many weeks later, he issued a press statement. It was all over the place. He was taking a stand against captain. So that was 1 out of 6. But we had 5 left. And long story short, clearly I can't even go into detail about each one, but I'd like to talk a little bit about about Jay Inslee, because then the Community Alliance for Global Justice, which is focused mostly in the Seattle metropolitan area, we thought, here's an opportunity. Now that Adam Smith has taken a public stance against CAFTA, we have a bit more leverage in getting Jay Inslee to do the same. And so we adopted him as sort of our next target. Now, a little bit of background. Inslee's district, the first district, includes chunks of North King County and southern Snohomish County, and then North Kitsap County. So this includes like Redmond and Bothell, and then across the sound into Kingston, Paulsbo, Cambridge Island. This is significant because this district includes the Microsoft main campus at Redmond, and also many biotech firms in Bothell, which were major proponents of CAFTA. And so we knew he was going to be getting a lot of push in the CAFTA direction. And so for that reason, we knew that the regular old lobbying from our side wasn't going to do it. No matter how good our arguments were, no matter how good our statistics, our personal stories, these are major players that were pushing him to vote for CAFTA, and we had to push back by using grassroots pressure. So we did some analysis, and we thought, okay, what's really going to get Jay Inslee? He's a good guy. You know, everyone said this in his district. You know, he votes really well on lots of things. He's supportive of lots of really good issues. He prides himself on being an environmentalist and on being one of the best environmental voting representatives in Congress. So our campaign slogan became "Earth to Inslee." Take a stand against CAFTA. And so our strategy was to go straight to his constituents and to pose the question, Jay Inslee is a great environmentalist, so why hasn't he taken a stand against CAFTA? Simple question, right? And like I said, we went straight to his constituents. So to talk a little bit about tactics, we began with sending delegations to his office to meet with him and his staff. Well, not with him at the beginning, with his staff, including local folks from labor unions, environmental groups, and faith groups primarily. But also, on one occasion with a speaking tour, we had guests who were labor activists from Mexico and El Salvador. By the way, how am I doing for time? I feel like I'm going over. Just a little bit more. Like 2 minutes? 1 minute. Oh boy. But I'm just getting to the good stuff. Okay, so tactics. So, but then, and this is where the photos really would have been great, then our friend Rachel Tabor made a huge, beautiful banner that said, "Earth to Inslee, stop CAFTA," which we started visiting the Jay Inslee's office outside of Mount Lake Terrace, and sort of waving at traffic for hours at a time. We made some impromptu visits into his office and talked with the staff. They weren't so happy to see us, but we were, polite but firm. And then when we really sort of got into fifth gear was when we created a project called the Fair Trade on the Ferries. We realized that Jay Inslee had constituents, thousands of constituents, that every day at 5 o'clock get on the ferries and go from Seattle to Kingston, from Edmonds to Kingston, or from Seattle to Bainbridge. So think about it, thousands of people that are a captive audience. So we got on the ferries with our flyers and our petitions, collected over a couple of weeks 1,000 petition signatures, including lots of emails and phone numbers, which we then could use to contact people afterward. And then we spent a Saturday at the Bainbridge Farmers Market asking people, telling people, saying the same thing. Why is Jay Inslee not taking a stand against CAFTA? And then handing them our cell phones and saying, here, you can call him right